Hi guys, it's Michelle, and today's video is going to be a true crime video. This is one of the scariest cases that I have personally come across because this girl quite literally solved her own murder, or at least her iPhone did, and it is such an interesting case and it's just heartbreaking. So without further ado, let's get into it. So a girl named April Millsap was born on January 2nd of 2000 in Wise County, Virginia. She was the only daughter to Jennifer and Bobby Millsap, and her parents actually ended up splitting up when she was quite young. And as a result of her parents splitting up, her mom ended up remarrying a man named David Lichtenfeld. And so Jennifer and April Millsap ended up moving to a small town called Armada, Michigan, which was a very, very tiny little town about 35 miles from Detroit. Honestly, April and her mom and her stepdad seemed to have a very happy life. Her stepdad treated her super well and very cutely. Like, there were so many different aspects of her and her stepdad's relationship that I found admirable. David just raised April as if she was his own daughter. And I think that's like the best thing a step-parent can do. David was very involved in April's life. He always wanted to meet her friends and her boyfriends, and also was saving up money for April to go to college. Like, he was just very, very supportive of this child that wasn't biologically his, but he took her in like she was his own. So April had a boyfriend named Austin at the time. Her and Austin, like, for a 7th and 8th grade relationship, I guess kind of a long-term relationship. They were dating for like over a year. Everyone said that they were just such a sweet couple and that they really loved each other. April was a very active teenager. She loved walking with her dogs. She would go and walk around Macomb Orchard Trail. Literally every single day she would walk her dogs down this trail. Walking on this trail was a part of April's normal daily routine, and it was a super safe area. Like I said, it was a small town, not too small where like it's too remote. There was a lot of people around, and according to a lot of people who lived in the area, there were always people walking on that trail or biking, and basically there'd be a lot of witnesses, so it wouldn't be scary to like let your 14-year-old child like walk the dog down that trail. Like, it's not really a big deal. She would have never been alone on the path, and there would always be like different families around. So on July 24th of 2014, April began packing up her backpack. She would pack treats and water for her dog Penny, and she brought her dog Penny with her for a walk on the Macomb Orchard Trail. And again, this was a routine, and her mom didn't think anything of it until it was around 7 p.m. and April still had not returned home. So these walks that April would take lasted always about an hour to an hour and a half, never over the 2-hour mark. She figured 7 p.m. was pretty late, and based on the amount of treats and water that she had packed Penny, it just didn't add up that she would be gone longer than an hour and a half. So April's mother, Jennifer, ended up texting her and asked her where she was and to come home. And when April didn't answer, Jennifer immediately got a sinking feeling in her stomach that something was wrong, because her daughter, this is 2014, she's a 14-year-old girl, she's glued to her phone, always on her phone. And the fact that she didn't answer a text was incredibly out of character, so her mom tried calling her, and again, no answer. This is when Jennifer decided to call April's boyfriend, Austin, hoping that they were together. So she called him, and basically Austin was helping one of his friends move a TV about 20 minutes outside of town, and he had no clue where April was and had not heard from her. So he immediately went back into town to help Jennifer find April. And as he got back into town, because I guess his cell phone had kind of spotty service where he was, he received a text from April that was sent at 6:22 p.m. that said, quote, "I think I almost got kidnapped, OMFG." So obviously now Austin and Jennifer are panicking, and Jennifer decides to call her husband David, who's at work. He immediately comes home and tries to help search for April. So Austin and Jennifer went separate ways along the trail to kind of look to see if they could find either April or the dog Penny. And Austin came across a bunch of people that looked like they were surrounded in a circle, and he saw that animal control was there. So he called up Jennifer and he said, "Hey, animal control's like over here. Maybe they found Penny or something. Like, come down here. By the time Jennifer arrived to the scene where there was animal control and a bunch of people around, 2 policemen had also come there, and she told them, like, I'm looking for my 14-year-old daughter and our dog. So it turned out that animal control was called because a couple saw an unattended dog on the trail at around 8:22 p.m. and the dog kept running to the woods and then back to the trail and then to the woods, back to the trail. Like, it was trying to lead people somewhere. And this dog was Penny. So the couple ended up following Penny into the woods, and that was where they discovered April's body. The couple, of course, called 911 immediately, and that's what led us to the point that we're at, which is Jennifer and Austin arriving at the scene of the crime. The only issue is that the police in this small town were not equipped to deal with a case like this. Like, this stuff just did not happen in Armada, Michigan. It was just not a common thing, so they had to call out to the Michigan State Police. And once they arrived, they scoped the crime scene and discovered April's body and that she had been stomped to death. So at this point, the police knew that they had found somebody who was murdered, and they also knew that there was this woman looking for her lost child. So the police asked her parents, like, what was April wearing when she left, and her mother told her she was wearing jean shorts and a white tank top, and the police instantly knew that that was probably the victim of the person who was found in the woods. But at that point, I guess they couldn't say anything because I think they have to, like, identify. There's, like, a big process that goes along with it. For several hours, April's family didn't know that a body had been found. And once it was announced that the body was found, there was still no contact from the police telling them that that was their daughter. Jennifer was taken down to the police station. This was a super tiny little station, so David was actually asked to wait outside in his car, and that was when he heard on the radio that a body had been discovered at the Macomb Orchard Trail, and he just knew that it had to be April. Yeah, her parents went home that night not knowing if it was April or not, and the identification process just took longer than I would normally expect, I think, because then the police came to the parents' door the next morning with a photo just like of her face from the autopsy photo, and her mom just immediately started crying, and it was just, I can't even imagine. If you have ever heard the hysterics of somebody who has lost a child, it is the worst thing that you will ever hear. Like, there is quite literally nothing like that. It's just heartbreaking. So pretty immediately, because of the way that April was killed, which was a combination of blunt force trauma, strangulation, and also, again, being stomped to death. Like, it seemed like the person who perpetrated this had a lot of anger towards April. And that led investigators to believe that this was done by somebody that April knew and was close with. So pretty quickly, her parents were ruled out as suspects, but her boyfriend, Austin, was seen as the number one suspect for quite some time. So he went in to do some questioning, and Austin just was acting kind of strange. His story was a little strange about how he didn't get the text until much later, and he didn't respond to it about her almost getting kidnapped. But at the end of the day, he still claimed he was helping his friend move a TV, and then he went to McDonald's with his friend to get a bite to eat. That's when he got the call from Jennifer, and then he headed back into town, and that's when he received the text message. Austin also admitted that him and April had gotten into a fight earlier that day, and he had actually deleted text messages between them. Once he realized that April had been murdered, because he's 15 years old, he panicked. Stupid decision. He literally said to the cops, like, that was so stupid and obviously looks way more suspicious, but honestly, we were just having a fight about something that she thought she saw on my phone. She was misinterpreting it, and I just didn't want to make it look like I, like, hated her or had any anger towards her. But obviously, this made cops kind of suspicious, although he was very open with the investigation and compliant with answering their questions, and also let the investigators go through his phone. But Austin promised that he did not kill April and he had nothing to do with it, and the police actually ended up contacting one of April's best friends, Maddie, and she also claimed that she did not believe Austin could ever do something like this, and that they had one of the sweetest, most loving relationships that she had seen. But nonetheless, he was kind of the only suspect at this point. So once the news had broke that someone was murdered in this small town, a lot of tips came in, and one girl sent a tip of a creepy white van that had 2 white men in it, and they were driving around and pointing at her, driving very slowly, and just made her feel really uncomfortable. She even took a video of the van because she got so freaked out by it. But actually, when the press conference happened releasing this tip, the owner and driver of the van ended up calling in. Basically, he was driving the van with his employees in the car, and he was pointing out houses that he had done work on to them. So he was quite literally not pointing at the girl, but pointing at the house behind her. His alibi ended up checking out, and the girl who took the video ended up identifying him that he was the person in the van. And then again, after the press conference released where, the police were asking for any information that anyone had, a lot of eyewitnesses started to come forward of people who were on the trail the evening that April was killed. A father and his 2 daughters who went to school with April claimed that they passed by April walking on the trail, and she was walking her dog, and they waved to her, but didn't actually speak to her. But the dad did notice that there was a strange man behind April who was wearing a motorcycle helmet, and he was walking his motorcycle, which is strange because motorcycles are not allowed on this trail. And he was walking it kind of behind her, but it didn't seem like they were together, and April was mostly just on her phone. And quite a few other eyewitnesses claim that they saw April and this motorcyclist man, but it never seemed like they were necessarily interacting with each other. It just kind of seemed like he was lingering, and it was really off. So the police department ended up being able to download information from April's phone, and they saw a screenshot of the text that she had sent to Austin saying that she was scared that she was almost kidnapped. But it was not actually a screenshot. It's like when you're on your phone and you swipe up and there's multiple apps open. I guess Apple takes kind of a photo of the last place you were on in that app, and it's stored in your data but not in your actual photos. So that means that she switched from the texting app to another app, but that was the last text that she sent. Another app that the iPhone ended up taking a picture of was the Sports Tracker app, which is a little fitness app, and they were able to obtain some information about the trail that April took, but they actually had to contact the Sports Tracker company, the people who ran this app, to get a more in-depth report of April's walk, because that was quite literally tracking where she was going. So while the investigators are waiting on the Sports Tracker app to follow back up with the information regarding where April was walking, and with the new evidence of potentially a person on a motorcycle being involved, one of the detectives was actually working on the case, driving about 25 minutes outside of Armada, and he saw a blue and yellow motorcycle that matched the description in the driveway, and for some reason he felt the need to take a picture of it and take a picture of the address that it was at. So detectives ended up later going to this house, and the motorcycle was gone, but they knocked on the door, and a man named James Muse answered, and he claimed that he didn't know anyone with a motorcycle, he never owned one, and he didn't know why there would have been a motorcycle in his driveway. But then once the police said, hey, we're trying to solve a murder investigation, he was like, all right, my weed dealer has a motorcycle, okay? And he was dropping off weed. So I guess he just didn't want to say it before because, drugs. Either way, he ended up giving the name of the drug dealer, James Van Callis. So the police were able to put James Van Callis's name into the system, and they found a man who was 32 years old, and they had an address for him. They showed up at the address, they knocked on the door, an older man answered, and they said, we're looking for James Van Callis, and he said, that's me. And they were like, well, are you senior? Because we're looking for James Van Callis Jr. And they were like, yeah, that's my son. They brought him out, they questioned him. He did say that he was in Armada on July 24th because he was visiting his brother Donnie. He also claimed that on the way to Donnie's house, he stopped at a Marathon gas station right in Armada. So the police asked him what he was wearing that night, and he brought his clothes and showed them that he was wearing camo pants and a sweatshirt and also these K-Swiss shoes. But these shoes later did not match the prints that were on April's body. So the police ended up thinking that they didn't really have a real suspect in James, but they still continued to investigate him because just something about the vibe of his family was off. His house was like a beautiful house, but it was disgusting on the inside, like full of rotting trash and garbage and old food, and it was just a potent smell that it was strange. And also the house was plotted on a large sum of land, and since they knew that James Jr. was a drug dealer, they figured potentially he was growing weed there. They checked out. James, his mom, and his dad all had the correct records and identification to be growing a certain amount of marijuana. But because they felt so strongly that this James Jr. character could be April's killer, they kind of took him up on these drug charges by arresting both James Jr. and Sr. for growing more marijuana than what was legally allowed in the state of Michigan. So this kind of was their in for them to get a search warrant on the house. So once they searched the house, they seized his motorcycle, the clothes that he said he was wearing, and other shoes in his closet that matched the herringbone pattern that was stomped onto April. So James' arrest was televised, and it was like televised as like a correlation to April's murder, but not necessarily that he was the murderer. But either way, an eyewitness who came forward earlier named Mary came forward and said that is absolutely the motorcyclist that I saw with April. So for some reason, they didn't really take what Mary said that seriously and just kind of waited it out. Because they didn't have much evidence, I guess, to convict James yet. But then the sports tracker app actually ended up following back with a very detailed video of the data of April's walk. So her average speed was like 4 miles per hour. She was walking at regular paces, and then there would be times where she sped up, like seemed like she was running from something. And she also made 3 phone calls to the same number while she was running away from something, obviously her perpetrator, but the phone number was not in service and never led anywhere. I still am confused what phone number she was calling. Some people think maybe she had just dialed the wrong number because she was just trying to dial very fast. I guess that's a possibility, but I don't know. So from the path from the tracker app, you can really see that April was running from her captor for 15 minutes. Like there was just a 15-minute period. I mean, I guess you can't say for sure if he had the phone or if she had the phone, but it's very clear that she was trying to run away at several points of this. And it is very, very heartbreaking. Her clothes were ripped off. She was stomped on, but she had not been assaulted, which a lot of people think that because the dog was barking so much when he was trying to assault her, that he ended up just killing her and leaving her there. So after the coroner time of death on April's death certificate, we see April's phone on the sports tracker app going 18 miles per hour. And this was when we have the perfect layout of exactly where the phone had gone. So the police ended up finding April's phone about a half-mile east of where her body was found. And the tracking app showed exactly what the killer did from point A to point B, and it was just insane because along that path were several CCTV cameras, not only of different businesses like the gas station, but also security cameras of different homes along the route that the killer took after killing April. So the police ended up going and searching down at the path that April's killer took, and that was where they ended up finding her backpack. The police still had James Van Callis Jr. as their number 1 prime suspect, but they were trying to link him to April in some sort of way other than just like being at the wrong place at the wrong time. But they really couldn't do that because James ended up having a 14-year-old son also who went to the same school as April, but the two didn't know each other. Also, April and James had never talked before. So honestly, a lot of signals were pointing to James Van Callis Jr. being the perpetrator, but there was no actual like hardcore evidence that they wanted to make sure they had like a rock solid case. So it was not as rock solid until James's girlfriend, Crystal, decided to speak out. So Crystal started dating James when she was 19 years old and he was 27, and the two dated for 9 years and had a kid together. She claims that she knows exactly what James was wearing the night of July 24th and that he was not wearing the K-Swiss shoes and he was actually wearing a pair of Jordans. She claims that night when he went to bed that he had an injury on his leg, and she asked him what had happened, and he claimed that it was from the dog cage. So they went to bed like any normal night, but Crystal was awakened in the middle of the night by a noise, and she noticed that James was not next to her. She went to go look for him, and she found him sitting at his desk cleaning his Jordans with hand sanitizer and a sock. She was like, "What are you doing? Why would you do that at 3 o'clock in the morning? That's crazy." And James claimed that he was cleaning off some oil that he got on the shoes. Crystal also claims that James asked her just weirdly vague about this and said, "Please, if anyone ever asks what I was wearing, say that I was wearing the K-Swiss shoes." And apparently he told his whole family this. And then Crystal was doing laundry the next day, and she found a clump of human hair and various leaves and stuff in the pocket of his sweatshirt. And then after that, his sweatshirt just disappeared. And so did the Jordans. So because the shoes were gone, that was difficult for the police to be matching the exact shoe print. But then Crystal came through and actually used a photo from her Facebook and said, "No, look, these are the shoes. He's wearing them in this photo." The police tracked down the shoes, got the exact model, and purchased the Jordans so that they could investigate. And sure enough, the bottom of the shoe had the same herringbone pattern. But also after comparing the prints to the prints on April's body, they could now see what was part of the Air Jordan label on this girl's cheek, which is just horrifying. So finally, they had enough evidence to arrest James Van Callis, and he was put on trial in January of 2016. And on February 8th of 2016, he was convicted for murdering April and sentenced to life in prison. And honestly, I think that it is very true to say that this case may not have been solved without the use of this fitness tracker app. Because even though this man came up as a suspect, it played a very big role in determining the timeline and the location of everywhere that April went. And then they could also match the timelines from CCTV footage of where the phone said that it was on the tracker app of different gas stations and houses that have security cameras, and it was just able to be matched up perfectly and led them directly to making the arrest of James Van Callis. This story is so heartbreaking because this James person literally just killed an innocent random stranger who was a child just walking her dog, and I cannot even imagine how horrible that must have been and how horrible and terrifying her last moments must have been. It's just extremely heartbreaking. But this actually is not the only case that I've seen of people who have solved their own murders. So if you guys would want kind of a series on that, let me know if that would interest you. But that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what other cases you would like me to cover. But that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe for new videos every week. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.